edition of the Sooner Pocket Podcast. We're a little over 24 hours removed from our spring game. Got some initial thoughts. The red team, the offense came away with a 65-58 victory. Some really good moments on both sides of that. Chris, tell me what your biggest takeaway from that spring game is yesterday.
My biggest takeaway is that Deion Burks is a bad man. He is a fast dude. He can see what coverage is thrown against him and find a wide open area in the zone, because that's other than like one blown coverage, that's what he was doing. He was just slightly altering his routes to go to the holes in the zone. He's a bad man. And one other thing that I took away is our team, they make good adjustments, because think of like a few years ago, the first time we really began to get weird with the scoring system was in the spring game, was when Lincoln Riley was still here. Defense had a 21-0 lead at the start of the spring game. If it was the same concept this year, defense would have ended up thumping them, because despite the slow start, the defense finished strong and almost came away with the win, if not for that last touchdown drive. We've got some good adjustments that our team is able to make, and we've got a bad man at wide receiver. What are some of the things that you noticed?
Before I get into that, I'll ask you, would you go so far as to say Deion Burks was kind of your MVP for the game from the offensive side?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Jackson Arnold, he looked really good throwing the ball to him. He was like 5 of 10 for like 200 something yards or 100 something yards. But Deion Burks, he can fly, he can get open. He was far and away the offensive MVP of that spring game. It's not even a contest.
Man, and I'll tell you, it's hard not to be really excited about our wide receiver room going into this season. Seeing Deion Burks, we've heard a lot about him. You had the footage from his time at Purdue, I believe, and we knew he was fast, but getting to see him out there in action and how he and Jackson Arnold are already really on the same page, it's nice. And knowing that we've got him, we've got Andrew Anthony, we've got Jaden Gibson, we're going to have Joel Farouk back, who's
Nick
not
Anderson.
necessarily, yes, we're going to have Farouk back, who's not necessarily a speedster, but he's got a lot of experience and he's one of our more consistent guys. We are going to rival anyone in the country for the best wide receiver room. My biggest takeaway, defense has a little bit of cohesion still to gain. I was pretty disappointed to see some of the plays pop the way they did yesterday on our defense. And at the end of the day, it's a scrimmage. I know we had some starters out, but there were some things there that looked like little misses fundamentally. And I know we, on our ESPN Plus broadcast, on the team's ESPN Plus broadcast, Dusty Dvorak called out one instance of that on a hot mic. So that was a little uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, he wasn't wrong that it was missed, that the coverage was missed. So I'll be interested to see how some of the youth blends with the pieces of experience that we have on that team. As we go further into the spring and summer, and hopefully everybody's on the same page come fall. But my offensive star yesterday was Caleb Hicks. 10 rushes, 62 yards.
He was good.
Yeah, running 6 yards a carry. His longest run, I think, was 31 yards. It was that first touchdown run he got. Heck of a run. He's got fast feet. He will be a fun one to watch. I know Coach Venables said after the game, Javante Barnes was kept out basically because he's a known commodity, was essentially the argument there. We were trying to give some time to the guys that needed the additional reps. And I think Caleb Hicks will be an excellent complement to Javante Barnes. Chris, I don't know if you noticed it. Our tackles for loss yesterday ended up picking up in the running game quite a bit, and the near the line of scrimmage passing plays had some nice pass breakups and did a really good job getting some tackles for loss as the game went on.
And something that contributed to that, a few years ago, we were talking about how the main thing that's getting an OU's way on defense is size. We didn't have the size on the defensive line. You look at the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Michigans, the Ohio States, and they've just had these big, big dudes on the defensive line who you did not want to go up against. Our last playoff game against LSU, we had a few 300-pounders on the offensive line, and their defensive line was bigger than our offensive line. That's never a good sign. That's changed. We have a huge group of dudes on that defensive line. Brent Venables actually said yesterday that going into the spring game, both of our true freshmen that were out there, David Stone and Jaden Jackson, each weighed over 300 pounds. They still got growing to do. They're just 18 years old. They're huge. So that really contributed to it. I will say the offensive line, despite the fact that there were 0 returning starters, they looked pretty good. They really did a good job opening up holes in the run game. That's really what allowed some of those touchdowns is they dominated the line of scrimmage for a bit, but then the defensive line came alive. David Stone got a sack. Jaden Jackson got a few nice tackles for losses. I think he also got a pass deflection. He looked really good, and it's really fun to watch. I know we didn't see too much of Danny Stutzman out there. Billy Bowman, what's his name? Gentry Williams and Woody Washington were all sitting out, but still, it's fun to watch our defense get better and better and better every year. And on that note, when it comes to the defensive players who were playing yesterday, I'm sure he probably got in a little bit of trouble, but I don't think there's any argument that Michael Boganowski was the defensive MVP. True freshman defensive back, got more tackles than anyone, I think, with 6. We saw him level a few of our guys, which you shouldn't be doing it to your own teammates, but it's good to see that that's just instinct for him to hit people as hard as he can.
Yeah, and
I don't think there's any doubt.
I saw a couple of the teammates letting him have it a little bit after that first big one.
Yeah, Joshua Bates was not very happy with him, but I'll take as many big hitters as we can get on that defense.
Yeah. Yeah, and Boganowski, he's a true freshman out of Kansas. I think Junction City, Kansas, or something Junction, Kansas. I don't get up to Kansas very often, as you can tell. My last trip to Kansas was actually for a Taylor Swift concert. So not my typical trip to Kansas necessarily, but they produced some good football players like Michael Boganowski. I think he had an excellent spring game. I think potentially more impactful in the game was PJ Adibaware. He led the team in sacks. He was the only player with multiple sacks yesterday.
He was eating.
Had two tackles on top of that. And I think he had an extra sack that didn't get counted. Late second quarter, early third quarter, somewhere in there.
Definitely
so
did.
I'm going to unofficially give him credit for 3 sacks, but he had a really nice showing. He's one that last year was good. We knew he was going to be good, and he was a highly touted addition to the D line. He spent a lot of time in the weight room clearly this off season, and I'm sure that's only going to continue. He's going to pick up. He is going to be an impactful player. He was really my star of that game. Here's my question. Why are we calling it red and white? Why don't we just call it offense defense? That's what I want to know. I didn't fully understand the red and white designation. We're the separate jerseys, but just call them offense and defense.
I get that, but honestly, that's how most of the spring games are done anymore. Every spring game you watch, it's a color versus a color, not a side of the ball versus a side of the ball. Yeah. But I agree with you.
Maybe so. Hey, I've got a trivia question for you. This is one I actually didn't know. What was the name of the spring game before it was called the spring game? And we're going back a few decades to what the annual spring matchup was called.
We just talked about this yesterday. The varsity alumni game.
That's right. The varsity alumni game. Good call. Ended in 1983 after the unfortunate knee injury to OU alumni Mike Babb. He ended up dying the next day in the hospital as a result of the surgery. So That was unfortunately the
Nice.
end of the varsity alumni game. 1983, it went on 34 years. I think it was Barry Trammell over at Sellout Crowd that had a nice article on the history of that game the last couple of days leading up to the spring game. So
And you
definitely an
know,
article to check out.
definitely. And there was one varsity alumni game where Billy Sims, who was in the NFL at the time, went out and broke a big run against our against our defense, which I'm sure both the fans enjoyed and were a little worried for our defense at the same time. But it would be fun to see like Joe Mixon come back and run through the defense or something like that. But that reminds me, speaking of Billy Sims, to my trivia question. Which of these four running backs in OU history had four 100 or more yard rushing games in a single season?
Did you say
Was
had
it
four or
A,
had more?
had more 100 plus yard rushing games in a single season? Was it A, Billy Sims, B, Greg Pruitt, C, Quentin Griffin, or D, Steve Owens?
That's a good question. I'm going to lean Quentin Griffin and just use that as my answer.
Well, that would be a correct answer. In the year 2002, Quentin Griffin ran for 100 or more yards in 12 of the 14 games of the season, which I think that record has a chance of being broken this year with Gavin Sawchuk.
I was going to say
His last,
Sawchuk was coming to mind for me at first as a
the
candidate.
last, he barely played the first half of the season because he was hurt, didn't trust his foot, but that second half of the season, he tore it up. The last 5 games he played, all 5 of them, he had over 100 rushing yards. He was just going on a tear. I think he ended up averaging like 6.5 to almost 7 yards a carry at the end of the year. If he runs almost as well as he was in those last 5 games of the season, he could eclipse 100 yards every game. It's just a matter of how much Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley want to give it to him.
Yeah. Hey, here's a question on the subject of the varsity alumni game we talked about. If we were to carry that to today, your top returning quarterback, wide receiver, and running back, I want to know who you would pick. It's got to be an active NFL player. For me, I'm probably going Jalen Hurts because I think he was arguably the best game manager of the recent quarterbacks we've had that are in the NFL. No shot there at Baker and Kyler, supremely talented. I just think Jalen brought as good of a talent, a raw talent to football IQ ratio as we've seen. Jalen Hurts at quarterback. I think you've got to have Joe Mixon in at running back and wide receiver. We may have to allow you to go back a couple draft cycles, but I would tentatively say Marquise Brown. Just the speed there, I think that's a hard thing to beat. Who are you grabbing at quarterback, running back, and receiver from recent NFL history?
So running back, the obvious pick is Joe Mixon. I'd love to pick who I think was the best running back we had, Rodney Anderson. It's just he could not stay healthy in the NFL. He played like 2 preseason games and that was it. Now he works for OU, and it was kind of reflective of his time at OU. He was only healthy 1 season, but that 2017 season, I remember Georgia allowed on average like 40 or 50 rushing yards a game going into the Rose Bowl, and Rodney Anderson ran for like 150. But Joe Mixon is kind of the obvious choice at running back. Quarterback, I will save for last. The wide receiver, I'm going to have to go CeeDee Lamb because he's not as fast as Hollywood Brown, but he's still got some speed to him. No one that I have ever seen at OU in my lifetime, of course, I don't know before, but in my lifetime, no one has had a better set of hands at the wide receiver position than CeeDee Lamb. And I don't trust anyone to break tackles like CeeDee Lamb could. There's that one picture of him surrounded by the 5 Texas Longhorns at the 25-yard line, and he scored on that play. He made an art of just making people look foolish. There was that one game against UCLA in 2018. The catch didn't end up counting because his first foot went out of bounds, but that one where he just leapt up with one hand and snagged it. there
Yep.
was he was as good of a 50-50 ball catcher as anyone, which go back to the Rose Bowl against Georgia. He's a true freshman. Baker put up a 50-50 ball and he let maybe a 2 feet above him and snagged it. I mean, he was a phenomenal receiver, and he's far and away our best receiver in the NFL right now. He's one of the best in the NFL. Quarterback, it would be hard to convince me not to pick Kyler Murray because Jalen Hurts was a good game manager. Baker Mayfield was a great team player, but Kyler Murray, he just brought something to the table that the other two didn't. He was equally as good of a runner as he was a passer. Jalen Hurts was a good runner in short yardage situations. He could just kind of muscle forward, and he was a pretty good passer. He kind of struggled at the end, but it was really the fumbleitis that got him. Baker Mayfield, he could run on occasion, but he was a much better passer. Kyler Murray could put the biscuit in the basket from a mile away, or he could just throw it straight up and outrun the throw because he was so quick. He was a very accurate passer. So give me Joe Mixon, CeeDee Lamb, Kyler Murray. It's hard to beat that trio, in my opinion.
Hey, on the subject of the best hands, and that's a good trio. Don't want to take from your trio. On the subject of the best hands, I am going to dispute you on this one. CeeDee Lamb, far and away a star, deserves his rightful place in Oklahoma football lore. Ryan Broyles, I would argue, is the single best receiver of our lifetime. 1998 on, had some incredible names in there. Antoine Savage, Mark Clayton, Brandon Jones, tons of them, tons of them. Ryan Broyles, far and away, he holds several records for OU, terms of receptions and yardage. There's certain records there he's got. That man was more reliable in clutch situations than just about any receiver I've seen in Oklahoma football history in our lifetime. So if I was going to pick someone that I thought was the best of our lifetime and make that the criteria, it's Ryan Broyles 6 days a week, twice on Sunday.
I get you. I've just seen what the main thing I think of is like that game against Baylor, the Big 12 championship game. One of the first plays of the game, it's that swing out pass to the left, and Baylor had an elite defense that year. That was a great defense. He catches it like 2 yards beyond the line of scrimmage and makes maybe 8 people look foolish before 70 yards down the field. He gets caught. I think the only reason that people might see Ryan Broyles as being better is because Ryan Broyles is the guy at wide receiver that year. Like he was far and away the guy. CeeDee Lamb, every year he was here, he had a lot more supporting cast around him. He had Marquise Brown. He had Mark Andrews. He had Jaden Hazelwood. He had Jeff Bedett in 2017. Jordan Smallwood. There was a whole Lee Morris. Can't forget Lee Morris. There's just so much supporting cast that Ryan Broyles, he had a decent set of guys around him, but nowhere near at the same caliber that CD had around him.
Yeah, we'll just have to agree to disagree on that one. I think Ryan Broyles stacks up over CD in most areas, but at the end of the day, both stellar receivers. CD certainly, I think, has had the better NFL transition, but it's all academic at this point. Overall, do you feel better or worse about the Oklahoma team going into their first SEC season after this spring game?
It's hard to feel better or worse because at the end of the day, it's a spring game. It's a practice.
Don't
It's
go
hard
political
together.
on me here, Chris. Don't give me a politician answer. Do you feel better or worse?
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. The areas where I feel better or worse are the things that are going to be there, whether it's in a spring game or not. That's size, speed, and accuracy. In those regards, yes, far and away. Because we'd see last year, Dillon Gabriel, he did great things for OU, and I'm always going to be grateful for his time at OU, how he came in when we were at a really bad time and helped keep our program alive. But basically, we would see him wait too long on a deep ball downfield, and he'd throw it, and the wide receiver would have to stop and wait for it to get to him. He'd underthrow him all the time. Where yesterday with Dion Burks, he'd throw it, and if Dion Burks didn't even look, he just kept running, didn't put out his hands, it would come over the shoulder and hit him in the chest. It was an insane level of accuracy that we saw from Jackson Arnold. Yeah, it's not as competitive of an environment, but accuracy in practice translates to accuracy in a real game. Second thing, speed. We already know how fast Andrew Anthony is. He's got some burners on him. We know that Nick Anderson, once he gets in front of you, it's very hard to catch you. We saw the speed of Dion Burks yesterday. The defensive backs, they'd see him go past and they just give up. They knew it was a lost cause. And we know that Jackson Arnold is a pretty good runner too. We know that Jalil Farouk is fast. We know that we have a very fast wide receiver room, and it's hard to beat speed. So with the accuracy and then speed, finally the size. Like I mentioned earlier, our defensive line, they are so big. It is a unit you do not want to go up against. I would not want, because if you go towards the middle, you've got David Stone or Jay Jackson or Dejon Terry or any of these players. Let's see here. Is it Jacob Lacey or Devon Sears that had to retire? It's Jacob Lacey. So, or Devon Sears. All these guys, all over 300 pounds, who are very good at what they do, and they're waiting for you. So you try and bounce it out to the edge. You've got PJ Adibaware, you've got Ethan Downs, you've got Trace Ford, all of whom are these strong, athletic guys who are not going to let you get past them. We saw PJ and Ethan Downs yesterday turn on the jets on a couple of those option plays to shut them down behind the line. So you've got that accuracy, you've got the speed, you've got the size. That's what you need to win. That's what you can tell from a spring game. And I'm hopeful. I'm not sure we're going to go the SEC championship, but
So
I
overall
honestly kind of
across the
feel
board, overall across the board, you're saying you feel better about the team based on yesterday.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
What about you?
I'm gonna say overall, I feel, encouraged by the progress. I think if you were gonna break it down offense versus defense, offense, I feel much more positively because there's a lot of cohesion there that just wasn't there at points last year. So to see that and see Jackson Arnold have a reliable target and us have a tight end that has a function on the team, it's good to see. I think the defense left a lot to be desired. And to be honest, it was kind of surprising at points to see what was almost a regression at points with running backs hitting just spots where there was no contest for a gap, wide receivers putting our safeties on their backs. I mean it's I left a little discouraged by the defensive performance. I'm optimistic that between Zach Alley and Brent Venables and Todd Bates, they'll get things short up there, and come kickoff, we'll be in better shape. Overall, I'm encouraged by the direction we're going. Here's a question I wanted to ask too, and this will be quick because we're about out of time here. I wonder why everybody prefaces a Dillon Gabriel assessment with, I appreciate everything he did for us, but I think people forget Dillon Gabriel came into an extremely volatile environment after the departure of what at the time, and probably still, was the best quarterback coach in the country, best offensive mind in the country. A team that was a bit broken spiritually, a fan base that was broken. He came in and put together an excellent season before getting knocked out by injury. Comes back the following year and puts together an all-star, an all-American caliber season. One of the best seasons that an OU quarterback has had before. Did
Never
he miss
forget
the
that
occasion?
Texas game.
Yeah, did he miss the occasional deep ball? Yes. Every quarterback has. Jackson Arnold missed his share of them yesterday in the spring game.
Yep.
You look back to Sam Bradford, Baker, Kyler, all of them. Jason White, our best deep ball quarterback ever, in my opinion. He missed some of them. This is a common thing I hear, and I'm not sure where it comes from, to be honest with you. Dillon Gabriel, I think, is criminally underappreciated at this point. I think as time goes, people will realize what we had with Dillon Gabriel, and that, you know, he's probably someone that we can look back and just say Dillon Gabriel was an excellent quarterback, without throwing a butt, without throwing a preface.
He was.
So that's my soapbox for the night before we're out of time.
I agree with everything you're saying. The only I was just going on one point to saying it's encouraging to see like a really accurate deep ball, and Dillon Gabriel had his share of those. Like in the 2022 game against Oklahoma State, there was that really pretty deep pass to Drake Stoops in the end zone for a touchdown. One of the best throws I've ever seen Dillon Gabriel make, and he had his fair share of really nice throws this year. And at the end of the day, he is going to be seen as one of the better quarterbacks in OU history, because I firmly believe he's the reason Brent Venables was given a chance to overcome 6-7. He's the reason that we went 6-7 and not 3-9, because no disrespect to any D1 athlete out there, you've reached a level that I was never going to be able to. But if Davis Bevel had been our quarterback day one, I don't know how that season would have gone.
What about General Booty? What about General Booty? We see him yesterday, and sure, he's not winning a Heisman, but he had a capable arm and capable legs. I will never forgive the execution of that 2022 OU Texas game. I look back on that was straight coaching malpractice from all levels of our staff.
I still don't understand why Nick Evers was never put in, but the fact is Dillon Gabriel, he's the reason that first season we got the best case scenario out of that team. We had a lot of the Lincoln Riley players. We didn't have a great defense. We had a small defense. We had an offense that was kind of here and there because we lost 2 number 1 in their class quarterbacks. There was a lot that was missing from that team. And Dillon Gabriel throwing for 400 yards in all those games and torching the defenses, like against Oklahoma State in the first quarter, at least Kansas, those first 3 games of the season, like against Nebraska. He did everything he could against Texas Tech. He threw for almost 500 yards against Texas Tech that year, but we didn't have a defense. So we ended up just falling short in that one, but he really did everything he could for us. And so he's definitely one of the better quarterbacks in OU football history. My whole thing with I appreciate him, but was just saying I like seeing that there's been an emphasis put on really making sure that you are being as accurate as possible with that football.
Yep. Well, this has been another edition of the Sooner Pocket Podcast with Sam and Chris Knight. It's been great talking with y'all. We are just a few short months away from another season of OU football. We went from 6-7 2 years ago to 10-3 last year. That's a heck of an improvement. I'm expecting, some improvement in other areas this year. Whether we'll hit 10-3 again first year in the SEC, who knows? But we can hope. Until next time, hope everybody has a nice week. Come check us out, www.soonerpocket.com. See you later. Boomer Sooner.
Boomer Sooner.